Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. Sorry for the delay start here. If you could only see behind the scenes, you'll see sometimes the struggles of doing a live show that we tried for relentlessly for over the last half hour to get Monroe Nevels, our guest, through on the internet, and it didn't work. He's going to be on the phone. So we do have him. He's waiting in the wings. And Rendlesham Forest, I always say, is one of the most interesting UFO encounters. It involved a military base in England, an American military base in England. It happened in December of 1980. And for those of you who are new, you should hear a lot about the story tonight. But I did post a link in the show notes, and it's also in the text down below in YouTube, Facebook, all that. So you can read up on that. It's a very interesting encounter. It happened over a number of days. I think it was December 26th through the 28th, I believe. And our guest was with Colonel Charles Halt at the time when he saw some things, some amazing things. And one thing I got to tell you right now, I really like about Monroe, and after doing a bit of research, and by the way, Jim Peniston is the one who actually connected me with him. And he throws no punches. There's no flights of fancy. So that you could kind of make a UFO joke out of that somehow. But anyway, he says things the way they are. He does not embellish at all. I've talked to him, and he's a great witness to this very unusual event. And I'm really lucky to have him on this show tonight. We have a blog, as usual, this week from Charles Lear, and it is called the UFO News Clipping Service. An interesting blog. Check that out. Our blogs are always made into audio blogs. We're a little late on this one this week. Had to do with the cold weather, believe it or not. It's not too bad right now. And a hello to a friend down in Florida. And I think we're about ready to get started. I do want to thank everyone that listens to the show and everyone that supports the show. I really appreciate it. And we are ready to roll. Here we go. Hello there, Monroe.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. Well, we gave it a good try, didn't we?
We did. I always try technology and not up to date on it like most people are.
Yeah, well.
We made it.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for phones anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So Monroe, you were there. You were there at Bentwaters at Rendlesham in the Rendlesham Forest, and you had quite an experience. And if you would, first of all, a few people have asked me why they haven't heard that much from you over the years. I know you were in a few different movies, documentaries, stuff like that. But have you kind of kept quiet about this situation over the years?
No, sir. What happened is that when they started, originally the way it happened was that my last name is Neville, and the British spell my name as Neville, and it's actually supposed to be Nevels. And so up until 2003, no one had ever been able to get a hold of me, or they had tried supposedly. And I finally got, Brian Gumble finally got hold of me in 2003. And that was when we started finally connecting and getting things out into the public. I, for one, was in disaster preparedness. And I had a major contact with the base wing commander all the time. And the reason I had the contact was my background as a Marine, having skills that was different than what I had from the Air Force. And so, I was able to help connect in the Cold War with nuclear, biological, and chemical experiences. And my experience was a trainer or an instructor. And I trained teams that went out for observations when we had exercises or the real thing. And so I stayed busy mainly with the base commander and the wing commander, both Colonel Conrad as the base commander and Colonel Williams as the wing commander. And they signed off on my APRs or Airman Performance Reports. So I was in direct contact with an officer, Captain Sue Jones, that was my boss. And she was brought in specifically by 3rd Air Force. And that was how I connected with the base and the wing commander. And as a photographer, I had top secret clearance anyway. And as a top secret, I could go anywhere on the base I wanted to go and shoot photos. And it was expressed one time, I know, by Colonel Hall in his latest book of some of the negative things he put in about me, and that I had, wandered off into and got taken down by the security police because I was in a secure area. And when they were told to call the wing commander, he straightened them out on that idea real quick. And so I had freedom to run around the base for him and the base commander because I could communicate with them better than I could with some of the other people. And that was how I got started with it. And on the way I got started with the Rendlesham event is I had done several, I guess about 5 or 6 different programs and special assignments by Base Commander Colonel Conrad. And on the 27th of December of 80, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the base commander sent security policeman, Lieutenant England, out to my house in base housing over on Woodbridge. And he stated he was very adamant about going through the house to check and see if anybody was in the room, in the house, where they could hear what was being said. And consequently, what happened was that he made the statement to me that Colonel Conrad had sent him out to pick me up to put me on a special assignment, and said that, he said, this is top secret clearance. He's top secret. He said, you're not to discuss it with anybody at all. And he said he wants you to go out there and make your own observation, because he said you're the only one he can trust to go out to the site and make an observation and come back and give him an honest answer. And that was how it all got started. And that was the beginning of the event, and then of course on through the night.
Right. And can you, I think it's always important for, people that are unfamiliar, as I mentioned in the beginning, I did put a link down below just so, people that are new want to research, but kind of a recap. You went out on the 27th, but Jim and John Burroughs, they saw what they saw on the 26th. So if you can kind of just, in a nutshell, talk about the events that you know of. And first of all, did you hear about this before you were contacted to go out that particular night?
No, sir. I was not. Wasn't in contact. The base commander, Colonel Conrad, and I communicated quite a bit, and nothing had been said. And there's a lot of this, what I call disparity about this whole thing. Colonel Hall, I have nothing. I want to make a statement right now. I do not have a vendetta. I do not have any anger, bitterness, or anything toward Colonel Conrad or Colonel Hall. However, and I say a big however, he has put out a lot of information about me and tried to discredit me. But I have a statement that I learned a long time ago, not only from Colonel Williams, but the wing commander. But other, he said, Monroe, he said, if you'll always tell the truth from the beginning, you'll never have to go back and change your story. And that's exactly what I've done. Is I've told the truth from day one, and I'll tell the day till the day I die. It'll be the same story. It'll never change. And
Right.
with that in mind, what happened was that Colonel Conrad wanted me to go out with my observation skills. He had experience with me, even getting flying in the helicopter and going around and doing what we called tone down back then, which was camouflage. And of course, my background as a Marine was much different than the Air Force. And I was trained as a combat Marine. I was also a helicopter mechanic. I was also in nuclear, biological, and chemical, and I went to the best schools that were available at the time. And I was able to witness much more things that other people never got to see, with all the different chemicals and radiation, etc. And I was trained to fly at 100 feet up with Radiac Instrument and be able to detect radiation on the ground from 100 feet. And while the aircraft was flying. So I had that experience and I had the knowledge on how to put this together. So Lieutenant England came out and told me that Colonel Conrad wanted me to go out and do my own research and come back and give him an honest answer, and he would be at the club. So we did. We went out. I had to take my daughter, to up the chapel on Bentwaters and leave her with my wife. She was 3 years old at the time. So we did that. But before we did that, Lieutenant England, I'm getting a mix. Lieutenant England proceeded to tell me what had happened. And he said that just shortly after midnight on the 20th, I guess it'd be now the 26th, but between 25 and 26, that Bennington and Burroughs had been out and they had observed the UFO incident. But he did not want to take his word for it, because he really, I don't think, believed it was there or for whatever reason. But he wanted me to go out and come back and give him a report. So we did. We talked about it, and he said that the rumor had been that someone was taken aboard the aircraft, and he didn't believe, he said he just wanted me to go out and make my own observation. So I did. So we went out, proceeded to go, and he was telling me some of the things that they had observed. And we got out there about probably about 4 o'clock, I'd say, in the afternoon, because he came out about 3. And he took me out there and he started to talk, and I said, respectfully, said, I told Lieutenant England, I said, sir, I said, please, let me look around, let me make my own observation and, and do what the commander wants me to do. And I didn't want him to put any interjection or anything into it, just let me look. And I was trained to do that. So that's what I did. And as we looked, he showed me the marks on the ground that were 3 pods where this aircraft or whatever had sat down. And I talked to him, and it turns out that I was told that the Forestry Service had said that they did a densitometer reading on the ground and marked where the aircraft had sat down. And I'll call it an aircraft because it's easier for me to communicate that way. And anyway, he said when it sat down, that the impact on the ground or the indents on the ground were all the same and the same density. Well, what that meant was that there was uneven ground. And over the years, as I thought about all this, I put it together in my own observation that obviously it looked like it was controlled maybe, say, by a gyroscope, kind of like a top spinning around. And what was happening was that I figured it must have hovered and then dropped the legs down and just set them down, but it stayed even. And in doing so, that would compress the ground in those three spots at the same thickness. So as I looked around and saw that, I saw three indents on three different levels. And if you take a tripod, like from a camera, you take a tripod and hold it by the head and drop the legs, they'll match up and even out with the same level. So we did that anyway. I checked that and I noticed that the trees had been knocked down in some areas. But I was told again by Lieutenant England that when this took off, that it went through the trees 100 feet up, went through the trees and didn't knock off any limbs. And it just went through it. And so I looked up and checked this out. And looking around, I could not see anything supernatural or anything like that at the time, because all I was doing was making an official observation for the commander. And as I looked, I saw several things, like the trees and looking around at the ground and looking at, and I didn't see anything out there that was anything major at the time. But when I went back, we started back, and out the gate, when we started out to go back out the gate to go back to see the commander at the club, all of a sudden there was a lot of static electricity. And the static electricity, what I guess was, it was so strong that the hairs on my arm and my neck were sticking out. And I couldn't believe it. And I asked the lieutenant to stop. And it was starting to get dark. And he had a pair of night vision goggles. And I was stepped out of the Jeep. I told him to stop, and he stopped at the Jeep. And on the left-hand side of us going out the gate, on the same side where this craft had landed, it looked like an eyeball. And I say an eyeball because if you look through night vision goggles or that we have now, it's picked up by heat, and the sight is black and green, and it just looked like it was winking. And I've observed, and I thought, okay, if it's blinking, that means that it's just blinking, it's turning on and off. And I kept watching it, and I was getting kind of agitated with Lieutenant England at the time, because he wanted me to get in the Jeep. He was kind of scared. And I said, well, her let me observe. So I went around and got in the Jeep, and it calmed down. The light stopped. Then I got out, and when I got out, it started up again. And I got back in the Jeep, and it stopped. And I got back out one more time, and he kept saying, let's go, let's go. I said, sir, please, with all due respect, let me do what the commander has sent me out to do. And so I kept watching, see what happened. And I got back in the Jeep, and I said, okay, we can go. So we went to the club. Was all scruffy, and we went to the club, and I said, man, we don't look good. He said, yes. He said, I'm ordered to bring you straight back from the Conrad. So I got back, and we walked up to the maitre d', and the maitre d' said, just a minute. And he stepped in and told Colonel Conrad that I was out there. And he come out the door, and he didn't look at Lieutenant England. He looked at me, and he said, Sergeant Neville, do you think, what do you think? I told him, and he said, well, do you think there's a reason we ought to go back out and check it out and further observation? I said, yes, sir. He said, come with me. And we stepped in the room, and I honestly didn't see more than maybe 8 or 10 people in there, but I wasn't paying any attention. So anyway, the commander asked me to give a briefing, and I did. And then he asked me a question. He said, are you ready to go back out? And I said, yes, sir. So he turned to the rest of the folks in there, security police and civil engineers, etc., and told them to go with me. Well, at the time, I did not know what was going on with Colonel Hall. Colonel Hall came down to where I was sitting at the table as they were going out the door, and he says, Sergeant Nevels, he says, you think it'd be okay if I went out there with you? And I, at the time, I said, what's the colonel asking me as a staff sergeant if he can go out there? Well, later on, over the years, Colonel Conrad told me that he ordered Colonel Hall not to go out there. And I didn't know why, but he told me. And he said, I told him not to go out there, and he did it anyway. I told him not to write the memo, and he did it anyway. I told him, and et cetera, et cetera. And back in, I think it was 08 or somewhere around that time frame, John Burroughs and I met with Colonel Conrad and his wife, Jeannie, up in San Angelo, where they live, about 85 miles from where I live. And he told me up there then all the things that he had said and done. Well, over the years, because of what I had to say, I started being shot down by Colonel Hall. And Colonel Halt and I had been, up to that time, pretty good buddies as far as we went around doing photography together. And I would do things for him, taking photos and stuff. And I did that. But somehow his story didn't match up with my story. And that's where all the disparity came from. But over the last 41 years, I've never changed my story, and I will not change it. This is what happened. So we go to, it was suggested that we go to the base and pick up, a Radiac Instrument. So we went over to the disaster preparedness office. By now it's getting dark and late. And I went over and picked up 2 instruments, an ANPDR 27 and an ANPDR 43. And I was checking those out to see which would be the best. I didn't have to check for batteries or check for recharge or anything, because that was my job. I did that every week. I calibrated them every week. And so I went in there and got picked out the one I wanted to bring with me and come on out the door. And why I did not pick up a densitometer, I don't know, an instrument that records how much radiation you get. So anyway, we proceeded to go back out to the site. And by that time, Colonel Halt and a few others were out there already getting light off and everything, trying to crank them up. Well, see, those light offs were gasoline powered. They were individual. They didn't connect anything. It was all battery operated. And everybody was kind of in a state of anxiety or trying to find out what was going on. And in the process, the light offs were having difficulty getting started. They just would not start. And they already had difficulty with them, but they would not start. So there was a lot of, I'd say, disparity among everybody trying to get it straightened out. And, and finally they got their light offs going so they could light up the area. But in the meantime, while they were doing that, I was over looking at the site, and Lieutenant Ingham was my escort. and it didn't happen the way Hall said it did. It was the way it happened was that Lieutenant England was my escort, and he was being carried me around by order of the commander. So when we got there, checked it out, I started looking at the holes in the ground where where the pad is set down, and they were all the same. So I took a background reading, then I went from the background reading to see what it was and compared that with the site. Well, around the pad location where it sat down, it raised a little bit, not much, but it did raise some radiation, and that was going with gamma. And I couldn't find any gamma range, not enough to be significant. And as we kept looking, I went on around some of the other sites and was checking it out. And I think it was Colonel Hall that said something about looking at trees. And we got up and looked at Boo from where I was up the trees. But the problem is that it was so cold. And batteries do not last long in the cold weather anyway. And these batteries are already probably 25, 30 years old, so it was an old instrument. But we used it because that's all we had at the time. And that was what we called it. We called them Radiac Instruments, but they were Geiger counters in a sense. And anyway, it was suggested that I go to Beta and try that. And when I went to Beta, it blew up, and it went from the first scale that was the lowest of 0.5, and on the 0.5 scale, it went all the way and pegged out. So I went to the next level of 5 rankings, and as I started to watch that, it started kicking in, and it was clicking big time. And it was like sounding like a clicker that was just running crazy. And so we got up to around 7 rankings, and by that time it was already getting stronger in beta radiation. Now let me make a comment on the radiation. Beta radiation, or we'll go from alpha. You got alpha, beta, and gamma. Gamma is like an X-ray, so that was out. That wasn't there. So we went to the alpha radiation, which is only reach out a few inches, and the only way that can hurt you is if you inhale it, or if it gets on the burn mark. Let's say, for example, you got a cut on your hand and you get it in there, it'll burn. So then I went to beta, and when I went to beta, that was where it was kicking in all the time. And so beta will kick out maybe 5 or 6 feet. And it is more dangerous only when you inhale it again or get it on your skin with a burn mark or a cut mark or something like that. And I've heard that Sergeant Burroughs, Edmund Burroughs, inhaled it. Now, he was going around saying that he had all these medical problems. I personally do not think that was the case unless he got up to the tree and put his mouth up around the tree and breathed in, kept inhaling it, then yes, it would hurt him. But otherwise, I didn't have any effect that I know of, and no one else seemed to have any problems either. So that's a story that it got out. But as we checked the radiation, and found out what was going on, then we searched around and did our research, and across the field, over there by what was called the farmer's field, there was the building over there, and it looked like something was on the ground, and it looked like, as I called it, like a boiling pot with liquid that was liquefied steel that was melted and burning and popping off, and it looked like sparks might be coming from the, from the vessel. And as we watched it, it would appear to get warmer and colder and warmer and colder. In other words, like a blinking area. So as it blinked, Colonel Hall made a decision for us to go over the fence and see what we could find. As we started over that fence, of course, then it got brighter and it disappeared. And we couldn't find it. And I kept looking up, and we were all looking up, and I saw three, what looked like three discs, if you will. Same thing from that pod. In other words, you got the three pods. Here I see the three discs, and I connected them together in my mind. As we watched them, one was more independent of the other two. And we called it the lead vessel, for lack of anything else. And the crazy thing was, I told, it was so cold out there, but I laid down on the ground. I told Colonel Hall I was going to lay down on the ground on my back with my elbow to the ground and my camera laid in my eye so that I could hold steady and see if they were moving, because at night your eyes are going to play tricks on you. So I laid down on my back briefly and looked up what I saw, and yes, they were moving. And the one in the front was moving more so than the rest of them. And it would blink like it was disappeared. And then what was happening is it would disappear. It would be on the other base, be on Bentwater. Then they'd call out on the radio and then go crazy, and then it disappeared from there and be back on Woodbridge. And that was going back and forth throughout the whole time. And the reason we had difficulty on the radio was twofold. One, everything had to be classified. Number two, the radios were not working properly, and they had three different channels, and they had to go from the command net to the security police net and the fire net, I guess, or not the fire net, but the command post. So those three radio channels were being used, and they were a relay. One would call the other one called the next one on flip, so they got everything, recorded. And that was the way everything was going on, and it was hectic for a while. But back to the aerial, Hall says, Colonel Hall has been going around saying that they were down on the ground. That's not true. There was only one light that came down from the vessel, and it was coming down straight down. And what we now know as a laser thing is what came down there. It came down in one area, and it was straight down. It was not doing what I could see anything that looked like a grid search. I could not see anything coming down to our feet as he added on to later. The original tape that Colonel Hall had was only good for about 15 minutes. He used that mini tape recorder to go around on the base. He would record things so that he could turn it over to the secretary and let her type out, what the events of the day or whatever. So he didn't know how much tape he had left on there. So he would start it and say something and then turn it off, turn it back on, turn it off, turn it back on, turn it off. So how that turned from maybe a 10 or 12 minute tape into a 26 minute tape or later is to be heard. I don't know. But it was a lot of stuff added on that was not. And that's where the problem comes up. You hear too many things about too many people want too many things. They all saw everything and nobody saw anything. And, that's what I always called it. But, that's the problem we have. There's a lot of misinformation that distorts the real truth about what went on.
Hmm. Well, the story is certainly spectacular enough. A couple of things, since you just mentioned that the tape, why don't I address that? Uh, I'm just trying to understand because the tape was supposedly released without his permission. And so that makes me wonder why it would be added onto if he wasn't, planning on that ever to be released. What do you think
Well,
about that?
I don't believe that. I mean, Colonel Hawk was my knowledge of Colonel Hawk back then was that he was very let me try to think of a word for it. He was very adventuresome, and he was always looking for a new adventure. And I had a little nickname for him, called him Mark One. And the reason I called him Mark One was because he was always ahead of everything. He wanted, he wanted to get out, and if he saw something that was interesting, he was ready to go explore it. And we always kidded about it. But on that day that he took that, uh, if he did not want it released, it was because, according to Colonel Conrad, and Colonel, let me make a note on Colonel Conrad. He and I are still good friends. We talk at least once a month, every month, and we have been for some time now, ever since I met him with Burroughs. And so I stay in touch with him, and he stays in touch with me. And and he tells me several times. He said that he thanked me because he said I sure saved his butt over time and kept him out of trouble with some of the things. And that was because I had a working relationship with Colonel Pascoe. I had a relationship with Colonel Williams. I had Colonel Conrad, Colonel Hall, and I had all of them. The officers respected me because I treated them the same way I expect them to treat me. And that was my Marine Corps training. And as I say, my first drill instructor was my grandmother. So I learned how to respect people. And so I never tried to backtalk or anything, with that. And so, through the years, if you, as me, I've never said anything different. But if you say one thing now and then you go back and you add a little bit more to it, you may as well take a piece of if you take water that's pure and then you drop something in there one time, then you've already contaminated the water. So from then on, you no longer have the purity out of it. And I try to keep the purity onto it and not add any more, not subtract anymore. And if you ask me, I'll tell you the truth. And if not, then I keep my mouth shut. And I'm just not going to fantasize about it. And if asked what, I know that after all this happened, I was ordered to report back to Colonel Conrad. And I did. And he asked me what I thought. And I said, well, sir, I'll tell you what I think. I said, I'm an observer and study of Soviet Union. And I said, the Soviet Union has a satellite that is about 400 miles, 200 to 400 miles up. And I said, that satellite can go down on a beach in California and beam down on a woman in a bikini and tell you what kind of material it is, just about what kind of texture it's got, what color it is, and et cetera, et cetera. So I said, if they can do that, they have the capability of doing other things. And I said, that's what I see. I said, I can't prove that, but I can see the reality of it. And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, will you keep an eye out for me and let me know if you see anything different? I said, yes, sir, I will. The next day or the day after, I think it was Sunday, we were out. My wife was driving back to the base, and as we were going back to Woodbridge, I saw some lights up front of us on the road, and the road at that time was pretty straight. And as we started back, there was a very high speed. It looked more like a formation of a jet engine, with the wings on the engines on each wing. But it came through there at a super high fast speed with no sound. So I knew it was not anything that we had that I knew of. And it flew over, but we never got a chance to see it again. It disappeared, and that was it. And other than that, that's been really about it. The experience that everybody encountered, I always tell the old story about the elephant. You got 6 blind men that look at the elephant. Each one of them sees something different in their brain. And that's what happens out there. But the facts stand for themselves, and that I try to keep straight with you.
Right. I understand that. When it comes to your thoughts, do you still stand by that thought that you think it might have been a foreign technology, even though there was so many other things witnessed? For instance, the craft. I know you didn't see the craft, but you saw the impressions on the ground. So is that still your thoughts that it could have been technology? And if so, why haven't we seen it since by our adversaries?
Okay, let me say this. The UFO phenomenon has been carried for the years, many, many, many years. And, we hear about the stories of, the ancient civilizations, et cetera, et cetera. But in 1947, when the event at Roswell happened, of course, it was covered up. People started talking about seeing flying saucers. And what happened? The U.S. Air Force developed a flying saucer that was actually able to take off the ground and was able to hover for a little while. And then from then on, you never heard any more about it. And the Air Force was always trying to cover it up, just as everybody else was trying to open it up. And technology and experimentation, etc., has to be secret. It has to be classified, because if you don't, then the old saying in World War II was "loose lips sink ships," and you might start passing out secrets and they disappear on you, and we see that daily now. But the idea that I had was that someone was Linda Moulton Howe tried to get me that same time frame when Boris and her were together with me. She tried to get me to say it was an extraterrestrial, and I said, "Ma'am, I don't even know what a terrestrial is, so how can I say that it's extra?" And I said that because she kept trying to push me to make me say that it was an extraterrestrial craft. I said, "I don't see that. I don't see it." And later over the years, I thought, well, let's see now. If somebody takes off from Mars and comes to the States and stops at McDonald's or someplace and gets a sandwich and goes back, I said, that don't even make sense to come from them to come here and explore us. And there's no evidence. And I said, yes, but where's all of our technology coming from? And there's a book out that I picked up at one of the old bookstores about Area 51. And the story goes through and it explains how the SR-51 was all made up, SR-71, and, and all of the various techniques. And it all makes sense. It makes sense to me that, yes, that could very well be it. And I think that over time, the phenomenon has been sensationalized. It's been pushed to, well, that was A UFO is nothing more than an unidentified flying object. That can be a chute flying across the room, it can be an airplane, it can be a ship. If you can't identify it, then you've got an unidentified flying object or an unidentified object. And my brain tells me, and my experiences over the last 50 or 60 years says that, there's rational for everything. And just because it looks like it could be, that's all it can be, is it could be. And so I look at it from the technology side and say, where are we today as a result of what happened 40, 50 years ago? And, it all makes sense. The gyroscope idea came about because of the way the stabilization was. Spinning top that I talk about comes from the fact that it was probably spinning to stabilize it, and the legs come down to sit it down on the ground. And what do we have today? Do we have drones that do the same thing? Yes, we do. Where do they come from? Where did the idea come from? Where does some of the airplanes like the SR-71 or the B-1 or the B-2 or other technology, where did that kind of technology come from? Well, it could have come from any kind of source. I don't know. But I do know that, my experiences, I don't associate it necessarily with all of the I call it hoopla. That's not a good word for it. But all of the ideas that come, well, everybody sees something. And that's like, I can't picture that myself. It's just not enough evidence to verify anything different.
Well, okay. When we come back, I'm going to ask you some more questions that I have ready to go. As far as what you saw, I want to also talk about what you think that Jem Peniston might have walked up to. Just thoughts. Now, right now, I'm going to play a 3-minute clip so you can take a quick break. This clip is actually with a military personnel, Shannon, and he's going to be talking about not something he witnessed, but he's going to be talking about the John F. Kennedy, USS John F. Kennedy incident. And here it is. We'll be back in 3 minutes. It brings me great pleasure to speak to Shannon this morning. Good morning, Shannon. We're having our coffee together. How about that?
Good morning, Willis.
Good morning. So thank you for contacting me. And you made a beautiful artwork. I'm going to show that artwork at some point that involved Lou Elizondo. And he's thrilled. He's so excited to get it. So I will be showing that once I get it. You're sending me a copy, and I really appreciate that. But I'd like for you to talk about the UFO, the military UFO incident, and just go, if you would, into what you knew about it and first heard about it.
So back in 1998, when I was on board the USS John F. Kennedy, I heard something, and it stuck with me. But I'm not going to tell you the story because I don't want to tell it twice. So I was on the John F. Kennedy from 1998 to 2001. Then I went to a couple of other commands, and then I was I got lucky and I was able to come back to the John F. Kennedy in 2007, right up until its decommissioning.
Wow.
During that time, I was the LPO for security, and we're talking probably around 80 personnel. I was in charge of a security. And the story that I heard both times exactly was that in the early 70s, the John F. Kennedy, while doing rough tray exercises in the Caribbean off the coast of like Guantanamo Bay, where we have rough tray, a glowing sphere was above the flight deck of the ship. The ship went into general quarters.
What does that mean?
Power went out, apparently.
What does that mean, general quarters?
General quarters is basically where everyone needs to be in order to fight the ship against enemies.
Yeah.
Or it could be we go into general quarters for training, or general quarters for, let's say, a fire.
Yeah.
You know, we have a huge fire. Everybody has to go and fight the ship in order for us to survive, because we can't call 911 in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So
what happened was, both times that I heard this, there was a sailor, a lookout, who saw this sphere, and apparently he freaked out and he had to be sedated.
So that full video is going to be up just like in a couple hours from when this video ends. So you can watch. He goes in to tell more about it, and actually he saw on a video a firsthand witness talk about the same exact thing. But he was not a witness. He did hear it, and the story never changed. Anyway, welcome back to you, Sergeant Monroe Nevels, retired. Thank you for being on the show today. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you.
I got you. Good. So a couple of questions come to mind. First of all, going back to where you mentioned that above the impressions, you didn't see any broken branches. I thought there was actually pictures somewhere that I saw at one time and other people talking about broken branches. Did you not see any at all anywhere?
There may have been, that was a statement that I had heard, because if you walk through the forest, you can't always tell what is fresh fallen or fallen previous. And I heard 2 or 3 stories that what was happening, that was Lieutenant England had been filling me in on all of the things that at the house before we left. And he said that, the Forestry Service checked the densitometer, and that was what he told me. And then he said the crazy thing is that the craft went up through the trees and didn't knock any limbs down. So that's the only verification that I have of that. I would think that it would, but again, that's hearsay. So I don't know, honestly, whether it was trees on the ground that fallen previous, or they were already there, or whatever. But it makes sense that it would anyway. And, that they would be some limbs on the ground. I think Livingston and Burroughs said there was some on the ground. So they were there first, so I would think that if they said that, that would be the accurate picture.
All right. And Charles Hull has been on this show a few different times, and he has described seeing this thing. Well, it's sort of like what you said, a little while back, and the eyeball thing. He says something looked sort of like an eyeball and looked like molten, like iron or something was dripping from it and sort of like bouncing through the forest. Is that a different thing than what you were describing?
Actually, what I described is what he later described. I told him, it looks like a melting pot out there. It looked like it had melting steel in it, and it was hot and bubbly and popping because, let me say this, at nighttime, and you see heat out there in the woods, your eyes are playing tricks on you, and you think they're moving, and they may not be moving. Or, in other words, like from 200 yards out, which I think it was about, I'd say at least the length of a football field, and probably a little bit further than that, maybe 125, 150 yards, is what it looked like from where we were at the fence. And when we started over the fence, Lieutenant Hall and myself, Lieutenant Colonel Hall, myself, and England stepped over the fence. And when we did, it started getting real bright, and it started pumping like it was getting hotter. So I think out of more shock than anything else, we all jumped back over the fence and got on back to the other side. And then all of a sudden it disappeared. And then when it disappeared, it was 3 objects up in the air. Now, Hall said it was 5, but I never saw 5. I saw 3. And it's always been 3. And you had one front, 2 in the back, and they were kind of scattered and relatively close together. And he said that there were beams down at the front of us. There were not beams in front of us, never. And I was right there with it the whole time, so I know. And the only beam we saw come down was one that was over, and again, someone, I believe it might have been Lieutenant England, that said it supposedly burned a hole in the weapons storage area.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was him or what, but that's what it was said. I did not witness that because from the distance and the cold and the dark, I couldn't tell what was what out there.
Right.
And so, those, again, from somebody else.
Right. Yeah, I had heard accounts of that there were multiple beams going down on the weapons storage area. I never heard before about the hole burn. That's interesting. And so you only saw that one beam, and it did not come down toward your feet like Halt mentions it.
No, sir, it did not. I repeatedly say it did not.
Okay. And
I would have.
Go ahead.
Because I was observing everything that was going on out there. I was listening to security police. I was listening to the colonel. I was listening to England. I was listening to all of them. And I was putting everything together, putting my mind to it, see what I could find out so I could make my report back to the commander. And
all right. Mm-hmm.
The beam itself was relatively thin. You could not hardly see it. You had to look, you had to strain to look at the beam. And it was like what we now would call the laser light beam, where it came straight down. And I made the comment to Colonel Hall out there. I said, it's not a regular light. We didn't know what a solar the laser beam was back then. And I said, it looks like, it's a direct light coming down from there, and it's not spreading like a normal light bulb or something like that. So I said, I don't know what that is, but it's very faint. And it came down, and I think when the object moved, it may have taken that one beam with it, but it would be kind of like if you were looking down through a funnel and you were looking down at the ground, that you might be trying to keep your eye on whatever you could see down there on the ground. And I don't know what they were looking at. I couldn't verify whether it was weapons storage area or some other area. I would suspect it was. Why? Because if that was the case over the years, that several people have made the comment about speed and nuclear and all this, and they said, why would you be looking in nuclear bunker? Well, my knowledge says that they might be looking for nuclear fuel. Suppose it was something from a long distance, and they checking out the fuel, or could they be checking out the base to see if there was weapons storage area had anything that they might be interested in getting, such as Soviet Union or China or anywhere, in the UK, that was checking the bases out to see if they could find anything, see if they could. Maybe they had instruments to check to see if they could test it and see if they could detect. There's all kinds of theories that come out with that. And my background over the years, I was in charge. I was the chairman of the local emergency management committee here in Abilene, Texas, for 2 years. I've been involved with it for several. and then I was a vice chair for about 8 years. And I was always the one that was the go-to when anything came up for nuclear. And our base, right next to Dyess Air Force Base, and I tell them, I said, if we are, our base is the number one target area because of our aircraft. And I said, well, you need to be prepared for it. Of course, nobody wants to be. It's always, it'll never happen to us. And they back off from it. But I was always the go-between with the state and with the local. And so I kept up on all that stuff. And there are instances where people are still trying to steal our information. And China is number one country that steals our technology all the time. And, and then, of course, Russia tries to steal it. And, Iran tries to steal it. And for what reason? Because we have some of the top scientists that do the work on it. And, that's where all that comes from. So my theory is that maybe, perhaps that's what was going on out there at that time. I don't look at it as being out of this world because I have no evidence to prove it.
I understand that, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute here. Someone asked in the chat room, they wanted to know what color the beam was that came down from what you saw.
It was a lightest faint gray. It was kind of like, I guess that'd be the best way to say it, just kind of like a light gray. And it was pinpointed downward. And it was not moving in different directions and all that. It was coming down to the ground, and it stayed there wherever that vessel moved. That's where it stayed, but it was always pointed directly to the ground. And it said it was a grid, like a grid search. I don't see that, or I didn't see that out there. All I saw was it coming down the ground, period. And then they would disappear and be on the other base. Then it disappeared from that base and be on our base immediately. And those were the instances that I saw.
Yeah.
The base is only about a mile apart.
How many miles?
About 6.
6 miles.
And Bentwaters and Woodbridge were, if you went around the base, if you had to go around the road, it was about 6 miles. But you were literally across the runway. We had a long runway that all the aircraft landed on. And you had Woodbridge, and then you had Bentwaters. And see, I did all the disaster preparedness instruction, and I taught all of the people on the base when they come in. I do the newcomers, what we call newcomers, and I would brief them on what was going on, give them morale boosters and all kind of things like that, to kind of keep people going. And I'd go out on the flight line and I could go across it, and it'd probably take me maybe 5 minutes to get across, 5 or 10 minutes to get across there. So that's just an estimate on time. I mean, distance, I don't know exactly how far it was. I just say 2 runways, and that pretty well covers it.
Yeah. I understand with your background and your military history that you've looked into, and aircraft identification, et cetera, whatever it is, the background that you have, and then also knowing the threats of Russia and China, that would be the first place you would go. I totally understand that as far as what these things could be from. But I would like to just ask you what your thoughts would be if something looked like it was dripping molten or sparks or whatever it is. Why would you think that a craft from either Russia or China would have something like that happening? And also Jem Peniston, what he saw when he walked up, and John Burroughs both saw as well, and Jem walked up to it and touched it and all that. Would you still think this could be a craft at that time that did what it did?
I sure could, because okay, the heat generates various colors. Okay, now the hotter it is, the yellower it is, or the different colors changing. And if, let's say that vehicle was flying at a high speed rate, yes, that would generate heat. And even like an aircraft, when it flies, it gets static electricity around it. So what I was thinking at the time, when it was, my observation was that it was sitting out there, and the heat waves that come off of it could have been the deceptor. It could have made it look like they were molten material. No evidence was ever found that I know of that happening, of it actually having molten. I said it was like molten metal, because I could see what appeared to be sparks, but it also looked like it was movement, and the movement would have been heat waves that were generated over the width of the craft. An airplane, when it flies in the air, it develops a high velocity of static electricity. And if you did not have the little strips on the end of it, you could touch the aircraft and you could get killed because of the static electricity. So those strips on the wings are designed so that the static electricity blowing over the wings can they'll dissipate the static electricity, so you don't get harmed from it. And those are the things that I think from. And I look at all of the different things that I could observe then, and then go back through my mind and then evaluate over the last 41 years. And
You there? Well, supposedly his phone was plugged in, but we may have just lost him. Bill, are you there?
No, just that was my cheek. My cheek touched the phone. That's what it was.
Oh, okay. All right. You're back. All right, good. So do you remember what you were in the middle of?
I was in the middle of describing the heat you were talking about.
Yeah.
Of that. And what I was trying to say was that, at night, the heat waves usually can be observed. And static electricity on an aircraft, as I was saying, is strong enough and sufficient enough to kill a person. If you touch an aircraft, or let's say something like that flown for a while, and it lands, and if it didn't have the strips on it to dissipate the static electricity, it can be enough static in there that you touch the metal and it could kill you. And so the aircraft has these little strips on the ends of the wings, and if you ever fly on a commercial aircraft and you look out, you can see those little strips on the end. And what that's doing is letting that electricity go out through those strips and into the air, so that when it lands, it does not have that accumulated dose. And a lot of people don't realize that, but that's exactly what happens. And so, it has to have that, because I was an aircraft structural mechanic in the Marine Corps first, and I worked on helicopters all the time. I was structural the body and everything, and I had to go out and check those strips and make sure they were in good shape before it took off again. And so, you got all these little things that accumulate, and then your knowledge that you gain from what your experiences are to theorize. And that's what I do. I theorize and see what could cause instead of, hey, maybe this, man, that might, I don't do that. I just try to figure out what happened.
Mm-hmm. So if you, I'm not trying to get you to say they're extraterrestrial, believe me, because, but I just am curious. I'm just asking you questions along the lines of something being explainable. And that is the next thing I think of is, why would this incursion happen like a one-time thing and then that's basically it? It's not, we never see the technology like that again.
Well, I don't know. Maybe not at Bentwaters, but Lake and Heath, Milton Hall, and all these other bases that were in the UK were always coming up with UFO notices and everything coming out. And that's why I say I don't know. But but my question is that keeps coming up to me is, why are these so-called UFOs only going to military bases? Why are they going to bases with quote unquote nuclear operations or nuclear weapons on board? Why do they go to that? Why do they go to Navy ships that have possibly nuclear? Why do they go? It's always nuclear. And for the most part, every weapon, every encounter that we've had has always been around Roswell, been around, all these bases that happened where this technology was available. And why would they do that in the first place? I don't know. That's a question that remains unknown. Your top secret and your above top secret are supposed to be maintained so nobody would ever know. And of course, it's been declassified over the years. That's why I can talk about it. But up at that time, I wasn't able to talk to anybody. I couldn't do it because I've been chastised very quickly had I released information back then. And I didn't say a darn thing to anybody until I was told it was no longer classified. And then that's when I started speaking up.
Now, I remember reading somewhere that the MOD had a large file on this particular case. Have you yourself done any personal research into this, in looking into things like that? Or have you looked into this, say, since the internet has come along? Have you really dug into this, or are you just plain only interested in your own story?
No, sir. I'm not interested in just my own story. I look at everything.
I see.
If I base everything on my knowledge and my experience, then that's all I'll ever have. I'll never have anything else. So I have an open mind that I'm willing to listen to, and I'm willing to apply. I just don't take, the lies that were supposedly said and make fact of it. I don't do that. What I do is I take what I know, what I look at. I've looked it up on the computer. I've done research on alpha, beta, gamma, constantly stay in touch with what I read. I had a scientist that came out here from Alabama a couple of years ago, and she brought with her some contaminated rocks from that she got from the lab and a Geiger counter. And she went through the Geiger counter encounter with me on hers, and then translated that over the rankings and the middle rankings that we went by back in 1980. And she confirmed, and I have it in writing, that my readings were accurate, that they were considered around 7 middle rankings. That was about 25 times higher than the normal. And why that is there, I don't know, but that's what I detected on the instrument. And there's been question over the years why you say one time 27 and the 43. Well, the difference between the two is the ANPDR 27 has yellow, red, and or yellow, kind of pinkish red, and blue readings on the scales, and the 43 only has white. That's the only difference between those two instruments. They're both about the same, and they're both antiques. And I've got two of 27s at home, and I take pictures of them and things like that.
As far as I think that if someone has a open cut or something like that, then it can be dangerous. But other than that, that's not really that dangerous unless you breathe it in for a long time at that level. Is that correct?
Well, you would if you breathed it in, you breathe beta radiation into your lungs, it can into your body, then it burns and it can affect the internal organs. Alpha can do the same thing, but alpha, let's say for example, alpha might make you slightly sick. Beta would make you, I would say, pretty well, but make you sick. In other words, it'd make you know it, and it would affect your lungs. And I don't know if your lungs, I'd say lungs. It affects your internal body parts anyway, and it burns. And what it does essentially is just burns the tissue, and it doesn't give you any long-lasting radiation because it dies, but it does cause you to have some effect. And I question some of the things that Burroughs claimed he had to get money from the VA and all that. And, that could happen. I don't know. And I'm not going to be the one to say that, yes, it did, no, it didn't. I don't suspect it did because there was not enough contamination out there. But that's his story, and I'll let him keep that story.
All right. Another thing you hear, or I have heard over the years, that during the debriefing, some of the soldiers were drugged. What's your take on that?
Well, there were no soldiers out there; they were airmen. And,
airmen. All right, airmen. Pardon me.
I don't think. Well, the British say they call them soldiers, but I understand. But anyway, I don't know that they were or were not. The intelligence community within the Air Force, they have their own techniques of trying to get you to do things. And I know I had commanders try to get me to say something, and I wouldn't do it because it wasn't right. And I challenged generals. I'd be at a staff sergeant, E5. I'd stand up to the general just as much as I said he put his pants on the same way I did. And I said, you're a man, I'm a man. I'm going to tell you like it is. I said, my job is not to tell you how to die. My job is to keep you alive. And I said, I'm going to keep you alive like a combat Marine. I'm not going to keep you alive keep you dead like an airman. And that was my philosophy. And so, the things that happened out there, the radiation, they was declared that the radiation level was about at least between 25 and 100 times more than normal. But then again, that wasn't enough to make everybody sick. And anybody that goes in and said they get sick from it, I can't see it because I never did. If I got sick, I sure didn't know about it.
What was the general reaction to what you were seeing with the people you were with?
Normal reaction was everybody was out there trying to do their job. There was more hype on the other side than it was on mine. See, I went out with no idea. I didn't look at it being hype. I just my philosophy was back, when I went out to do a job, if the commander sent me out, the way I was trained as a Marine is I went out there, I did the job. If it meant my life, that was part of the job. If it meant that I went out there to get the facts, that was part of my job. And I was selected by the Commandant of the Marine Corps to go on embassy duty. So I think I had pretty good knowledge about what was going on. I made E5 in less than about 12 months, and that was unheard of. I made Sergeant E5 in about 13, let's see, I guess it was about 2 years and 4 or 5 months. When I went in the Air Force, it took me 5 years and 11 months to get that one grade back that they took away from me. So that's the difference. But my knowledge was there, and I trained my people the same way. And, so there's just a lot of disparity. I believe that there was something there. I believe that Pennington, he and I are very good friends. We communicate and talk about this whole situation all the time. And we're both theorizing, trying to figure out what could it be? What would it be? And that's what you have to do. Otherwise, if you don't, then you just forget it and leave it alone. And so we're always talking about it and talking about some of the things that have been said and some of the things that haven't been said, and kind of go from there.
Right. Going back to the debriefing, I can't remember the gentleman's name you spoke with, Conroy or something like that. But was that the extent of your debriefing on the whole situation?
No, sir. We talked about it over time, period, several times. And, he would always tell me, he'd say, Sergeant Miller said, I can't do it your way. And I'd say, well, sir, if we can't do it my way, I can't do it your way. I don't know how to do it. And I said, you're going to have to trust me. I said, if you can trust me to go out there and do whatever I got to do for you, I'll go out and do it, and then I'll come back and give you the answer on it. And that was our basic understanding. I did about 6 projects. One of them was realigning of all the base chemical suits, about 66 parts each suit, and 10,000 people. And I had to rearrange all of it. And I did it in 3 months and got accommodation out of it. And, I worked with him because he could trust me, and I could talk to him just like anybody else, and we'd get along real good about it. And so when Burroughs and I went to see Colonel Conrad and Jeannie, we talked about it, and he said constantly that he did not see anything at the time, or he didn't believe anything at the time, and he had to trust me. And he trusted me from my observation, and that's where we took it.
I see. I am putting the phone number up here now. I do not have a screener. You are on the only line we have for call-ins. So this is my show number that I have here. Again, I cannot screen the call. I'd really like for Jim Peniston. I know he's listening. Jim, if you want to give a call in, I'd love to hear from you. That number is up on the screen, 207-482-0556. So I know that you're keeping to your story. I do appreciate that. And I always think, and I often say, I'm not sure if this is Jim or not. We'll see. Hello, this is Martin.
Hi, Martin. This is John. I had a question for Sergeant Nevels.
Yes, go right ahead, John.
Hi, Sergeant. Thanks for coming on Martin's show. I've read 3 books on Rendlesham. It's a fascinating case. Can you tell me, weren't you with Colonel Halt when he was out and he saw the unidentified object fly close to you and aim a beam of light, a very narrow laser-like beam of light down on the ground? Did you witness that?
We've been talking. He's been talking about that, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't know you covered that. I'm sorry. So well, I'll let you go on to somebody else. I must have missed it. I missed some of the show. Sorry.
All right, no problem. No problem.
Thank you.
So that number's up again, 207-482-0556. Just on a side note here, I've been getting a lot of emails. A lot of people are sending me UFO sightings and things that they have. I do try to return all the emails, but do keep in mind, if you do email me, please keep it brief because I get so many. And again, I'll try to get back to you. I had several even later to, right up against the show, a number of emails. So that number again is 207-482-0556. And would like to hear from you. And I'm actually using my phone and putting it on top of my microphone. It seemed like it worked pretty good there. So as I was saying before the call, you're a person that likes to stick to the facts, and I do appreciate that. But I'm sure, and you talked about, I think your term was, everyone sees an elephant differently. Do you think that some of the accounts that you hear out there are pretty close to yours, or do you think they're all very variable from person to person?
I think they're variable. No one comes up. I've not heard in any time over the 41 years. I've not heard anyone with the same or similar instances that happened at Bentwaters and Woodbridge. The reason being is I was able to witness the radiation. I was able to detect the radiation. I was able to describe what went on. And a lot of your UFO sightings, per se, I think some of them, they sound like they're off the wall. And, you can come up with all kinds of theories, but I'm not despairing anybody from saying what they saw. Some of them sound legitimate, more often not legitimate. And, it's one of those things where this time the difference was that our encounter was witnessed by so many people at the same time, and so many of us had credibility that we didn't exaggerate from the truth. And that's what you have to have. If you can keep your story in line with truth, then you can evaluate and you can go back over it over again and theorize and come up with a reason. But if you change your story today, you do it today, and then tomorrow you come up and you add just a little bit to it, you've already contaminated the story. Then you add a little bit more and a little bit more and then a little bit more, and then over 41 years, you got a bunch of garbage out there. And that's the one thing that I made a vow to myself a long time ago, more than 41 years ago, when I became a Marine. I would be the best I could be and do the best I could do. Air Force tried to stop me and tried to discredit me with some of the so-called, I called them jealous hypocrites that were running around trying to destroy me. And the 3rd Air Force sent Captain Sue Jones in to be my boss. And she was the one that wrote my annual performance report, and I was always on 9, talking to Jed. And go to Colonel Conrad, they were 9s, and signed by Colonel Williams, they were number 9s. So I didn't have anything to hide. I kept it straight. And, and my integrity has stood strong over the years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to understand this question in chat. They want me to ask you about the others during that night. Are their views, do they agree with you or do they agree with Halt? He's talking about Bustinzina, but I don't know how to pronounce that name, England, Ball. Are there people that, are we talking about people taking sides with, oh yeah, you're more accurate than, I'm trying to understand the question in particular.
Okay, let me put it this way. It doesn't bother me which side you take. I'm just that way. It don't bother me because no matter what is said and what is believed, the truth will always stand above a lie. And if I tell you today that it's red, tomorrow I go back in there and I say, well, it was red and it had a little bit of green in it. And then I go back the next time and then I add some yellow to it. And then by the time it's all finished, no colors match up. And my colors stand, my story stands true, and I just don't change it. I'm not going to change it. So if you take what everybody else has said and compare it, then you can make your own judgment. And if you go back, you'll find that over the years, my story changed very little. And the others, on the other hand, keep adding to and keep adding. And Colonel Hawk does. You know, he says one thing, and then the next thing comes up and says nothing. I don't have anything against Colonel Hawk, but he gets mad at me, and he just wrote another book with John Hanson, and he's trying to tear me down because I stood for the truth, and I don't care. It don't hurt me. It hurts him. And if anybody wants to lie about what I say, it don't hurt me. It hurts them. And I just won't change. And maybe I'm stubborn, but my grandma was my first drill instructor, and she taught me well.
Yeah.
Tell the truth all the time. Don't never change it. And I said, okay, thank you. And at 73 years old, it stood pretty good.
Mark Twain had a saying that if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember. That's
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I always thought that was a good one. So the line is open, and that number is 207-482-0556. If this story didn't come out, of course, I'd imagine a man of your integrity would just have never talked about it. But hang on just a minute. We have another caller coming in. Looks like from East Bay, California. Hello, you're live on the air. Who am I speaking with? Hang on just a second. Try that again. Your name again?
Sure.
Yeah.
Elton, E-L-T-O-N.
Oh, yeah, Elton. How are you? I've talked to you before.
Hi.
Yeah. You got a question for our guest, Elton? You're gonna have to mute your computer, mute your radio. If anyone calls in, you're gonna have to mute your what you're listening on.
Hi, Martin.
Hey, Elton. Got a question for our guest?
Yes, I would like to know if he is aware of a book called Left at Eastgate, written by Larry Warren. He claims to have been there. It was on the 28th of December. And I wonder if he's aware of it and what he has to say about that, because he actually claimed to see aliens that look like children. So,
yeah, I've got something to say about that. If our guest doesn't, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll hang up now.
Go ahead.
I do not believe that Larry Warren had anything to do with anything out there. He's told too many lies, stories, too many things that, and all the books have been written by Bruno and everybody else. All of those people that have written the books, and his story changes so much on the internet and everywhere he goes. And I didn't know he was out there. I didn't see him. And nobody else seems to have recognized him, hasn't been out there either. So I would say that all of his is just barroom or pub talk.
Right.
Go in there, you don't want to sit there and add on and take away, and no, that's the way he appears, and I will not verify him at all.
Yeah, I think it's Elton. You're probably not aware of this because you had that question, but it's pretty much a given that Larry Warren was using secondhand knowledge when he wrote that book, and he was not there on site. It's pretty much knowledge. I do believe it was Larry Warren that first broke the story. Is that right, though? Do you know that?
No, sir.
How did that first get out then?
Well, it got out, I think, largely because Burroughs was trying to get the Air Force or the VA to give him disability because he was pushing pushing the story very hard from the very beginning. Him and I think Pennington and Colonel Halt and all of them, they were trying to go through the Office of Information, classified information, and they were trying to get the answers for it. And because again, a lot of disparity there, but I believe that Burroughs may have been. I don't know that he was. I can't prove that, but I have a feeling that through his stories that it did come through. I did my first story on 2003, and it had been out prior to that. So I don't know. I really don't. I couldn't answer that.
All right. Well, the other thought I had, when this thing happened, was it something that was very puzzling that you thought about over the years before the story came out?
It was by me. I thought about it and talked about it everything for the last 41 years. I was a bartender in the NCO clubs and officers clubs and Army, Navy, Army and the Air Force, and so I talked, as bartender, and I'd get in with especially with the officers and pilots and stuff, and we were always talking about experiences that we had seen, flying and things of that nature. So it was easy for me to communicate, and I always had their back, listening. But in was 83, I believe it was when they first started doing my recording. I did the one with Brian Gumbel. I think it was Invasion at Rendlesham Forest, something like that. I still have the VHS of that copy now.
What about the, I was told by, I can't remember if it was John Burroughs or our Charles Holt, or Chuck as he likes to be called. One of those two told me that they thought the original Unsolved Mysteries was very accurate. What did you think about that depiction?
Maybe the original Unsolved Mysteries, when was that recorded?
It was fairly early because they're pretty young looking. Looks like I have another call coming in, so we'll hold that thought for right now. Caller, you are on the air live. Welcome to the show. Your first name?
Joni.
Hi. How are you? Where are you calling from?
Fine.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. You have a question for our guest tonight?
Yes, I do. Has he ever discussed this with Linda Molden Howe?
Yeah, he talked about that earlier. Yes.
Sorry. Well, has he ever talked to anybody like Nick Pope?
About what?
Have you talked with Nick Pope about this? Do you know who Nick Pope is?
Yeah. Yes, Nick Pope, and Paranormal.
Okay, well, thanks.
Nick Pope and Paranormal Witness, I believe it was, did a film on me. And if you look on, I think it's on, let me think, History Channel, and it's called let's see, what was it? It was Nukes and UFOs and Nukes or something like that. And if you go on to Facebook, on the internet, you can look up, I know what I saw, and that was done again. And those are reported, but Nick Pope did the entire interview with me for the last one that I did. And he did that story on nukes and radiation. So I'm on there briefly. And that was when he talked, but he did the entire interview with me. I don't think Pope liked what I had to say sometimes, but that was okay.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. He asked me off scene, off the show what I thought, and I told him, and it didn't line up with the narrative, and so we left it at that. but I did go out to Los Angeles, California, and did a show out there twice. One with Pope and one with another company. And then the British company that did it, they put a lot of fiction in there, non-fiction. They're going to put it in there where, in other words, it wasn't what I said. It was made it look like I was just, the wrong person on there. And it wasn't accurate. But that was okay. And they tried to say, and Colonel Hall called me up on the last one and asked me if I had said that that a beam came down and burned a hole in the bunker, and I told him no. And he said, well, boy, they sure tried to make you say that it did. And I said, well, what they told me was, what they did is they took out the I heard part of it and left it and said that I had said that there was a hole burned in the nuclear weapons board. And I didn't say that. I said I heard that it was.
Yeah.
So that's how that got out.
Yeah, that happens a lot, unfortunately. On the cutting room floor, as they say, things change. So when this was happening, oh, wait a minute. I wanted to finish up the thought about Unsolved Mysteries. That was back in 1991. And when that came out with Stack as the host, do you think anything that you've watched over the years, I guess I'll put it that way. And the reason I'm asking this is for someone that's listening to the show, if there's an account out there that you think is pretty darn good, is there any in particular you can recommend someone watch?
Not as, per se, what I would recommend, and I feel this is the best thing you can do, is the book that Jim Bennington wrote on in Rendlesham Enigma is the most accurate of all books that have been written. His is the most accurate and the most thorough of the whole encounter. And if you read that, you can listen to that and you can hear what he is saying. And with an open mind, you can see what he's talking about. And that is a disparity of both what some people have said. But, that book was written very, Gary wrote and Jim Pennington wrote. That was the best that I've seen. Yes,
I did want to mention that. That's also in the show notes as well as on the text of this YouTube, etc. So if someone wants to get that book, I've got one coming in the mail. I'm pretty excited about. I can't wait to read it. So we have about 4 minutes or so left, and so as I was kind of hinting around, I think we got a break from a call. But if this had never come out at all, and do you think you would have just plain kept it to yourself and just think that it wasn't that big of a deal? Or when you saw it, so sensationalized, did you think it was over the top? What was your thoughts as you went along on how this story progressed in different ways?
Well, I never kept it to myself. After I found out it was declassified, and was no longer top secret, I spoke out. You have a clearance if you go out and leak out a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit more over there. Eventually, it's watered down and everybody knows everything. But when it was declassified, that's when I spoke out. But I've always encountered not the full details, but I would tell them what I'd seen, all of how it transpired, how I got out there, et cetera, with my supervisors and things that I had done. And then once it was released, then yes, I started speaking of it more. And we're glad to talk to anybody about it. And people that know me over the years have come to me and asked me what my encounter was, what I thought, and what I did. And of course, I'd tell them. but it never changed. It was always the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you keep in touch with almost everyone, or are there some people that you've heard talk that you never want to even talk to for their story, because of their stories?
I will talk to anybody, and I will answer the emails to anybody. And, it don't bother me because, I mean, if you don't talk about it, then nobody knows anything. And then if you tell the truth and you keep telling the truth and you keep telling the truth, eventually somebody's going to believe it. And that's the way I do. And I hope that when I talk about it, my main concern is, hey, this did happen. You can hypothesize and say what you want to about what you think it is, but facts are facts. Let the facts stand for themselves, and then go from there and see what you could figure out could have happened, but keep the facts straight.
I appreciate that very much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you tonight.
Enjoy it.
Yes.
And ready to talk to anytime, anywhere. And just contact me, and you have the contact form. And
Yes.
they can contact me at my email, Monroe Nevels Monroe Nevels 48@gmail.com. Or
Wow, you are certainly brave. All right, Monroe. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
you're welcome.
All right.
Thank you now.
Take care. All right, everyone. So that's it for the show this evening, and we'll be on next week with Dr. Bob Davis. Should be another good show. Thank you for watching, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.